Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us in person or online. My name is Jay Kundert. I work at the Iowa Valley RC&D, and we're here today to talk about metrics at your market. Let Us Grow Markets training series is part of a larger farmers market initiative that the Northeast Iowa and the Iowa Valley RC&Ds are working on across the state of Iowa to help provide resources for farmers market managers to improve farmers markets across the state. And that fits in the additional food system type work that both RC&Ds work on. So today, just to get right into it, we have four presenters. Starting us off today will be Darlene Walnick, who works at the Farmers Market Coalition, which is a national organization, and she'll be talking about the Metrics program, which is an initiative of the Farmers Market Coalitions. And then we'll have Josh Dansdale, who's the board chair of the Winneshiek Farmers Market in Decorah, talking about how they are collecting data and metrics at their market. And then we'll have two producers from here in north central Iowa. Charlie Puffer from Pufferowski Farm in Iowa Falls grows produce. He grows a lot of stuff. He grows vegetables, fruit trees. He's got pasture hogs, pasture broilers, and pasture layers on 15 acres. That's everything. And then we have Becky Huang, who's from Mason City, farms at North Iowa Berries, and does 3 acres of produce, berries, and microgreens. And they'll both be talking about different aspects of how they're collecting data at their farms and tying that in with some of the markets that they go to. So I think we'll get right into it with Darlene Walnick.
So my name is Darlene Walnick, and I am with the Farmers Market Coalition, as has been introduced. And hopefully you know about the Farmers Market Coalition. If you don't, hold on, let me get all that. Can you hear that? If you don't, let me tell you a little bit about us. So Farmers Market Coalition is, as was said, a national organization that works for advocating for farmers markets across the country. We work directly with markets, we work with state associations, and we do a lot of advocacy at the national level on behalf of those entities. We also do a lot of resource building and training, and we are always thinking about how we can help build the capacity of markets and the market vendors who are obviously at the heart of what markets do. And so what the good news is in Iowa, if you're a member of the Farmers Market Association, the Iowa Farmers Market Association, you are also a member of Farmers Market Coalition, because you have a state partnership with us. And so everybody who's a member of the Iowa Farmers Market Association is automatically a member of the Farmers Market Coalition. If you're not a member of your Iowa Farmers Market Coalition, we hope you become a member. And of course, also you can get membership directly with Farmers Market Coalition on our website. This is a screenshot of our website. You can see that we talk about the different things we do, and we are always happy to talk more about how we can help markets build their capacity. So this is the list of staff that we currently have at FMC. Everybody from our executive director, Jen Cheek, to our membership coordinator, Liz Comiskey, who you might have talked to in the past, till me down here in the bottom. Here I am having coffee. You can see that on the website, it tells you how to find us, our first name at Farmers Market Coalition, and we also have a direct line, and the phone numbers are on there as well. So feel free to reach out to us and ask us any questions. You can see the different programs and different things that our staff does. What I'm talking about today, of course, is about metrics and how we've gone around to figure out what we want to help, how we can help you with metrics. And so over the last 5 or 6 years, Farmers Market Coalition has been thinking about how to build a tool that would help markets collect data and use that data. And we did that even though we knew that if there were better options, we didn't want to do it. We didn't want to duplicate efforts, but we really figured out at the end that there was a purpose for FMC to be in the mix of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about metrics in our program, but I'm going to talk also about some of the lessons we've learned in building that tool. And it's probably also important to tell you that my own history is that I ran a set of markets in New Orleans, where I live, for a decade. And in that 10 years of running markets, we spent a lot of time thinking about how to collect data, and we ended up creating a tool for collecting data And then I have literally been working with markets and farmers and vendors and networks on data collection at this level fully for the last 20 years. So it's something that I've thought a lot about, and I've talked to a lot of you about what we can do and what we need. And that sort of turned into what we call at Farmers Market Coalition, the Farmers Market Metrics Program. And this is a program that is available to any market or any network to subscribe to for a small annual fee. But again, there are a lot of resources that we share freely with you so that we can share the lessons we've learned. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those today. So a lot of people come, when we talk about data collection, a lot of people like to tell us that they don't collect data. And this is an example of a market leader that told our executive director just that, and then she opened up this book with all kinds of data in it. And we said, this is kind of what we're talking about. This is data. So I think that's the first lesson. Markets, vendors, you have data. You have data that other audiences would like to know, and it's just a matter of figuring out what that data is, who wants it, and how to share it. Because that data can become this sort of visual. This is what Farmers Market Metrics offers its users, is this adaptable, dynamic reporting mechanism. So the data you collect is automatically aggregated into this, and it becomes this report. Each of these individual data points we call a metric. And each of these metrics, we spent a lot of time defining and refining the language around that. And so everything on here is something that we thought about and how to present it and how we thought markets and vendors would want it. I can tell you that these individual metrics, which at this point, Farmers Market Metrics Guide site probably operationalizes around 45 of them. I originally started with the list of about 137 metrics that I had collected from market reports I found, or annual reports, or reports about markets over the last 5 years. So obviously there's a lot of different data points people want, but what we tried to focus on are the metrics that we thought markets could collect and share easily, and that would also be helpful for their own internal needs. And so that's how we've come up with the numbers that we use, although we'll continue to add. But the point is to take data and to make it visual and appealing to the audience you're using. That's really the key of data. And one of the main, I have to say, one of the main ideas we have within the program is how you use data. What's the purpose? Well, here's an example of one purpose a market might have to collect data. They might notice they have a lot of shoppers to come once or twice a year. So how do you take that shopper and turn them into a regular weekly market shopper? Some of it is about asking them questions, and some of it is observing their behavior, and some of it is establishing what the market's doing well and what it's not doing well. All of that's data that you can collect to help fix this problem or to address it, let's say. So how we start with this really is we start with this idea of looking at your audience. When you're talking about collecting data, the first question you should ask yourself is, who wants that data? Who am I going to use it with? And so this is an example of how one of our partners went through with their markets and said, who do we want to talk to this year? And these are some of the ideas that the markets had and the vendors had about some of the entities that they wanted to share data with. It's a great list. You may notice that it's a long list. And so that's why it's important to take a list like this with your market and say to that market, great, you want to collect all that data, but let's talk about who those audience members are. And so you might take that list of group of different audience members, put them on Post-it notes, and then stick them on a spectrum like this. Say, go up to the front and put where that audience is along the spectrum. Are they constant supporters of the market? Put them near the promoter end. Are they sort of weak? They're kind of into it, but not really into it. They're supportive, but we don't see them that much. Maybe they're in the middle. Maybe they're neutral. Or maybe there's something of a detractor. Maybe they don't talk about the markets, or they don't talk about local food very well. Maybe they're more on the detractor side. When we have markets do this exercise, we find that markets are often talking almost exclusively to the strongly supportive end of the spectrum, the promoters. And that's great. That's definitely one audience. But what about those who are not that strongly supportive yet? How are you talking to them? And so that's why it's good to start with the audience. Think about who you're going to be talking to. And then you're going to look at what you're going to collect. And as I said, in the FMC version, we call these metrics. These are the metrics. And as I said, each of these data points, these metrics, was refined with a lot of different partners to get the right language that would speak to the audiences and really describe what the market does as closely as we could. So you can see that might be one that many of you noticed right away. Estimated number of visitors. You may notice that it doesn't say shoppers. It doesn't say customers. Well, the reason, of course, for that is that not everyone who comes to a farmer's market ends up purchasing something. Some of them are coming through and they may come and check it out, go with a friend, and then leave. They may come back, and you want to hope they come back another day, but they're more can be better defined as visitors. Visitors may become shoppers, but visitors are who we're counting. And as you can see, the way that we focus it is not only what the metric is, but what the collection method is, how often you collect it, what that would mean as far as what the language you might use with that. We call that the reporting context or citation, and also the audience that would be interested in that piece of information. That's how markets and market vendors can really think about data. Not only all the great things they want to collect, because we only have a limited amount of time, of course, but what are they going to use this year and who are they going to use it with? And that way they can reduce the collection fatigue, the survey fatigue that a lot of markets end up with because they collect a bunch of data that they never end up using. That's a key component of farmers market metrics. One of the areas, of course, that we really need data is with the vendors. And as the vendors are going to talk about later, I'm sure they're going to talk about the data they collect. Now, markets have not done a lot of vendor data collection across the country, that's for sure. But making the case for markets these days certainly includes making sure that we're talking about how vendors impact their community, but also how the market impacts that vendor. And so one of the ways we can collect data is by adding some simple demographic questions into the vendor renewal form or application, whatever you call it. Things like the primary product sales, were sales increasing or decreasing, where you are, distance production site to market. Because that data, that simple data of production, how many acres in production, how many acres are leased or managed or owned, is a very profound piece of data for markets to have as an aggregate number to be able to share with their government, with their funders, with their shoppers even. That data in farmers market metrics can be shown in two ways. This is what the data that the market organization can see. So these are two markets that collected data last year, and they added all their vendor data into this site, and they showed us how it looks. They're able to look at that and say, oh, I see, I can actually show this internal dashboard graphic, which tells me a little bit about my vendor. But they can also look at it from this point of view, because this is actually what we call a widget in farmers market metrics. This is the data point that is reported out once you collect data in your system. And so as you can see, the widget has your data, it has the description of the data, and then it also has a little bit of a context, which we call a citation. And those individual data points can be used too, not just in the entire report. But taking that data and then, as I said, making it contextual is very important when you're talking about data with audiences. That's great, 31 miles, or that's great, you have this many vendors. What does that mean to your audience? What's the context? So it's very important, we think, that you take that data and you add some language that talks about the existing conditions around that data. So in metrics, it offers that. It tells you the data to highlight the audience, and it also gives you a little bit of information as well as this nice message here. So like this, if you're talking about small businesses, this is the kind of message you would go to. Let's say you wanted to talk about the sales and how money stays in the community and doesn't leak out as fast as it does when you're talking about corporations. We also allow you to make one of those messages. You can see what metrics would give you that, what audiences you would use it with, and then what are the contextual statements one might use with it. How do you use that data? Well, because here's what we're finding is really interesting in markets these days. In the last maybe 5 years, I've seen a huge culture change in markets actually understanding that they now need to become part of the data collection team. But let me be very specific. I don't think markets should be doing this alone. I think that when we talk about markets as data collectors, we mean markets as the leaders of a data collection process. That might include researchers or funders or the municipality or nearby businesses, and of course their vendors as well. And so the idea is that the difference in the system like Farmers Market Metrics is that the market is in control of the data. They're the ones who decide what to collect. They collect it, they own the data, they use the data. But what we found is that now that folks are a little bit more comfortable with actually collecting data, they're still not that comfortable in how to use the data. You'll see it a little bit on social media. You might see it, in an annual report if you're lucky. We don't see much beyond that. And so that's something that Farmers Market Coalition is really thinking about, and we'd like all of you to think about too. That's why it's important that you don't over collect. You don't spend a lot of time collecting just dozens and dozens of metrics that you never end up using. It's better to find a couple key indicators and use them in different ways, like the ones we're showing you here. Your website is a great way to put a piece of data that stays forever. Obviously putting them in the signature of an email, the market manager's email. Did you know that our vendors only travel an average of 31 miles? And then a link to the metric site that you have. That's the kind of way a little bit of data can go a very long way. These are the areas that we also would like folks to think about. I mean, if you do any kind of social media, you may know these terms. But most people will focus, especially markets, they tend to focus on the middle one, the owned media, as we said. The top one and the last one are ones that we don't see markets using enough. And that's why data is so great, because this is where it works so well. Something like earned media is a great way to talk to people who write about food, people who blog about food, people who are just the kinds of people you see at the market who are always talking on Facebook about what they bought. Getting data to them can share that data farther, and because those are trusted influencers, that data really means something to their community. So thinking about data and how you can use it isn't just about the owned media. Think about earned media, but also think about paid media. And I know a lot of markets are using Facebook push and paying for those pushes to get their stuff out farther, and that's great, but there are other ways of doing that as well. Because what you end up doing with that data are things like that. Taking that one widget, this is a market in Mississippi that supports a very large geographical area. They thought it's the state capital. And they were shocked to find that the average vendor only traveled 62 miles. And they thought this number was so great. They not only did it on social media and put it in their newsletter, but they actually made t-shirts of this graphic and wore them at market, so that they could talk to people at the market about the 62 miles. It's a great idea. Lots of ways of using visuals this way. And, you might say to yourself, well, I don't do a lot of visuals. I'm not really into that. And that's okay. Metrics allows you to do that. But even if you don't use something like Farmers Market Metrics and you don't think you can pull off something as beautiful as this beautiful Crossroads year in review, this Woodstock Farmers Market, which is almost all text, is just as effective. It tells you a great deal about exactly what the market has done, and it serves the same purpose as Crossroads one. So don't be afraid. If you can do some visuals, great. If you can't, don't worry too much about it. This is a great example of how a market helps vendors tell data. So this is something that at the Fresh Farm in DC, where the farmers are actually able to have these flyers about their market. And I think they're beautiful, and I can imagine how different markets around the country would utilize this. This is what we share in Farmers Market Metrics. You saw a version of this earlier. This is actually a 2018 version that was done by the Charlottesville Farmers Market, as you can see. And this is actually still in draft form, believe it or not. This is something they actually pulled off the site to share with me, working with them. But you can see how much amazing data this market has collected in 1 year. And again, A lot of this data was done through a one-time vendor profile update, and that's where that information comes from. And that's really amazing. It didn't require them doing it daily, although there is data you can collect that way. This is really a very simple way. And you can see how much information it has about the organization itself and contact information as well. So I think that's something that you really want to make sure that you really communicate. This is one of the reasons I think that markets are underselling their own ability to do visuals. As you may know, every year, Farmers Market Coalition does a poster contest, which is open right now. If you're not submitting your posters to our poster contest, you should be. And you can go onto our website and find out how to do that. But this is from I think this is from obviously from the 2015 or maybe the 2016 contest. And I'll tell you, whenever I see what is submitted on posters, I am blown away at the ability of markets to offer beautiful images that tell an amazing story about their market with their posters. And just think if some of these added maybe a little piece of data, but I can see that markets really do have this skill. They're just not utilizing and thinking of it in the same way as data. So this is our website, as we've said, the Farmers Market Coalition.org website. As I said, if you're a member of Iowa State Farmers Market Association, you're a member of FMC, and you can look at member-only benefits, but anybody can go onto our website, look through our resource library, and then you can also see the Farmers Market Metrics Guide as well, which is where, let me try to pull that up here. I'll try to pull it up so you can see it. I just had it up. This is actually the Farmers Market Metrics Guide site. And this site actually is where all the farmers market metrics stuff is in. And we have things like data collection methods, how you would do visitor counts, how you would do vendor sales. These are all things that we learned from watching and listening and talking to farmers, and we want to make, and vendors and organizers, and want to make sure you can see as well. So all of this is available for you to look at. I hope that it's helpful to you. I think in end, what's most important is that markets not freak out about data collection, that they recognize that it's part of how they can make the case for their market, they can lead their market, and they can help their vendors, and they can make sure they're still there in 20 or 30 years. Thank you. I'm happy to take some questions.
Check. Okay. Darlene, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, can you repeat the question again? Yeah, well, I'm not sure if you can hear you, but the question was.
The question was, so some of the reports that are generated, those reports with the graphics,
Yep.
can those be generated? There's software that generates those reports.
Sure.
Including this metrics system.
So, Darlene, the question is, the reports that come out that you were showing us, is that software that's involved in the metric system, or how do you create those reports?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all. Our system is a collection, entry, and automatic reporting mechanism. We put a lot of effort and money into building something that data would automatically feed in and then push right back out to those widgets. And so all of it's contained within our metrics guide, those reports. But again, I think that the main thing is to figure out that sweet spot of data and some sort of a visual. I mean, I'm working with markets right now. We're using PowerPoint, 3-4 slide PowerPoints, where they're putting photos of the market in with a little data on the side. So for markets that don't have access yet to this sort of system, they can do it that way. But yeah, it's all included in the metric subscription.
And one other question.
Sure.
Do they, as far as encouraging vendors to share data, and do they have tricks of the trade there, and is that done individually, or does the market collect those and then enter it?
Sure. Darlene, can you hear that? Okay. So the question is, in collecting that data, is that something that the vendors are providing individually, or is that something markets are doing as a whole? And then do you have any tricks of the trade as to best ways to work with vendors to collect that data?
Yeah, it's a great question. I hope I get that question every time because it means that market managers are in the room, and that's good. Yeah, the culture of collection of data from vendors is something that is going to take a while. It takes tact and sensitivity, I think, and I think that's the first key to it. I think that the way that we set up market metrics is that it can be done either way. If a market is already tracking vendor level data, and some markets they collect sales that way, they do a lot of data collection. It's amazing what markets are doing out there. They can they can create a vendor profile and collect data that way. If they want to collect vendor data level data, they'll have to either do a profile or we decided to add this component of farm spread as a possibility to our subscription. See, what we found was that some markets were saying to us, look, we already collect vendor data. We do a database online management. Will it feed directly into metrics? Well, of course, we didn't really because we didn't design the first thing. So we teamed up with FarmSpread, who does have a vendor level management system that you can have, and that stuff feeds directly into metrics if that's the way you want to go. If you don't collect vendor data that way, you would then set up vendor profiles in metrics. That would either be done by the vendor or by the market manager. But for things like sales, we know that the culture is still kind of, there's a huge spectrum there. And so markets can do one of two things with sales. They can put it in by vendor level, which then helps them give, support back to vendors in terms of TA or to be able to download their information. But obviously some vendors aren't ready for that. And there's also some vendors in some markets are still not sure about the privacy and the sharing. And that's exactly right. You can put vendor data in only at the aggregate level for the sales day. So let's say you went around and said to vendors, fill out an anonymous slip, put it in this canister with your sales. We're going to total the thing up, and we're only going to put the total into the site. We're not going to put the individual vendor data in there. That's available to you too. But having said all that, that's entry. I think there's two things about what helps vendors and markets come together on this. And I'm sure vendors in the room and the ones farmers who are presenting will tell us exactly what their feeling is on this later on. But the main thing is that markets have to show how they're going to use that data to benefit the market and the vendor, and how they're going to safeguard it. And that's why it's important to have a process like ours where you're saying, look, I can't even share individual data. Doesn't come out that way. Or you've got to make sure that you start with the data that you could collect and that you could use. So the point is markets will collect data and they'll never use it. And so knowing that it's going to be safeguarded and knowing it's going to be used well to advocate for the market is how I think vendors become better, confident, have more confidence in the market's ability to collect and use the data. So I think we say start with the demographic data. Start with, production, acres in production, miles to market, things that are easily captured and that would easily show how to present that back out. And then you can move into more sensitive data. But I think it just takes a process, and it's a culture that changes over time.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. Darlene, we have a couple questions in the chat box here. I'm not sure if you can see these, but Andrea wants to know, did you say some of these templates are available for free?
Yeah, so that site I was showing you, that was the farmersmarketmetrics.guide site. That site is where one does, look into accounts and pricing, but it also shows you our templates. It's basically both the sign up and sort of the home of metrics. So all of our visitor templates, all of our here's how you do it kind of stuff is there. And, it might someday disappear behind the account subscription paywall, but it hasn't yet. And I'm kind of glad about that. I definitely advocate to try to keep that stuff on this side of it, because I think the more we share the way markets can collect the data well, the better. We've spent a lot of time talking to researchers and audience stakeholders about how to collect data well. Doing dot surveys for everything is not going to work for a lot of researchers. making sure that you have the right sample size and the right methodology for collection is something we spent a lot of time on. And some of it's going to require a little bit of a change among markets. But I think what we tried to do was to find that middle ground between what researchers wanted and what we knew markets could really offer. So yeah, all of our templates are on there. I'll show you really quickly, like this one right here. I think I showed this right here. This is like the visitor count, and it not only shows you how to do it, but you can see that it actually tells you step by step how to collect. It even shows you how to build a map. What should I expect? And then there's actually a worksheet right there that you download, and you can actually work off that.
And then we also, how much is the Metrix subscription?
For an operating organization like a market that has up to 5 market locations, the subscription is $252 a year. And that gives you a lot of functionality, not only site to the collections and the resources, the entry and the reporting, but you also get to be part of our monthly call-in clinics and have all of our tutorials and resources and everything else we provide. For markets that have more than 5 locations that they're operating, they would just add another $40 a year for market location. And then there's a price in case a network wanted to collect data on behalf with some markets in mind, which would show some of the aggregated data in a network dashboard as well. We have a lot of networks using Metrix. A lot of state associations and a lot of project leaders are using a collection of markets to actually have everybody collect data and then showing it in aggregate form. And those projects are paying for the markets to begin this process. A lot of FMPP grants are written with Metrix in mind, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. And then do you have any survey templates?
Yeah, our survey template, I assume we mean of visitors. Basically, because the way the Metrix is set up, we are going to operationalize the metrics first. So whatever metrics we've chosen to put into our system, we then operationalize those first. So for example, in visitor surveys, and I'll share that screen really fast too. In visitor surveys, we chose a bunch of different visitors questions that we found to be pretty universal among what markets want. It's not everything they want. It's not all of what a market wants, but it's a good amount of them. And so these are the questions that Metrix currently operationalizes. Everything for visitors, how they got there, how much they're spending, if they came to the market for the reason for the market, what other shopping are going to do, what zip code, how often they come, why did they come, and how did they hear about the market. And we'll keep adding to that. I'm hoping to get some more support this year to do what I like to call the retail metrics, right? More of about how shoppers act and what they think, because I think that's something that we're moving into in cross markets. And that's going to require some calculation methodology within this tool. So it's not like we can push all that out into Metrix, because of course some of it has to be calculated based on how many responses you have and things like that.
Okay, great. I think we don't have any other questions. Yeah, Charlie.
Are you talking to the successful markets and see how they're growing? Like the markets that you see that are growing, are you talking to those markets to see how they're actually growing their customer base?
Sure. So Darlene, the question is, are you talking to the successful markets that are growing around the country and finding out maybe some of the metrics that are maybe causing some of that growth, what they're doing to be able to grow?
It's a great question. I talk to so many markets about so many issues every day, every week, every month. I mean, it's basically the main thing I've been doing for the last 15 years. And so we're always talking about what are the characteristics of good, successful markets. Part of the problem is that the data has been so all over the place. So some of the markets, like let's say Green Market in New York City, the one everybody always goes back to, although that's only one example. They are doing a lot of deep research right now, and their data is going to help us a lot. But we're always looking at the research that markets are doing and the reports, so we're always talking to markets about what they think is the reason for their success. I can tell you that the good markets, the great markets, don't always know why. They're not always sure what's going on. I will say that it is my belief that part of what, when people say to me, what's the great markets? Who do you think the great markets are? Why do you think they are? I think great markets do I can only find two things all great markets do. One thing is they invite as many stakeholders into the process of decision making and analysis as much as possible, as early as possible. They're very transparent, very inclusive. And the second thing they do is, it kind of speaks to your point. They focus on measuring the impacts, and they move around. They don't just talk to one group. They talk to the anchor vendors. They talk to new vendors. They talk to the occasional shoppers. They talk to the regular shoppers. They talk to the neighbors who like them, the neighbors who don't like them, the government parties that they work with, the ones they don't. They're always moving around and measuring the impacts and measuring their effect on all of those groups, both internally and externally, and figuring out what they can do to better those. And I think that's kind of where we focus in on talking to successful markets for sure.
And then a follow-up to that is, do they have like a best practices page?
And then do you have any kind on their website?
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of best practices page for markets? On your website?
Yeah, we have an extensive resource library on our website that we do our best to encourage people to upload to, and then if we find something good, we go ahead and put it up there as well. And so I think you'd find in the resource library a lot of best practices, and we try to make sure that it represents the best of the best. I mean, there are a lot more reports out there that we could ever really have on there, but we're definitely trying to beef it up more and more, and we're definitely we're doing more and more webinars. I just did a webinar this week with markets that have created permanent infrastructure locations, so that I can do a case study on that. I heard some amazing lessons among markets that have built permanent infrastructure, and we were able to have the USDA architect on that call with us, so he could give us some insight too. So that's the kind of thing I'm always thinking about, how we can add more case studies to in the future as well. So any ideas you have that you don't see in the resource library, let me know.
Okay. And the website again is?
FarmersMarketCoalition.org.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much, Darlene.
Thank you.
Next up is Josh Dansdale from the Winneshiek Market.
Thank you, Darlene, for that awesome talk on metrics. And now what I'm going to focus on today is on the behalf of the Winneshiek Farmers Market Market Manager. And he is unable to be here today, but I will talk about what he does, as I am serving as the Winneshiek Farmers Market Board Chair. And so I'm going to talk about kind of what he does, how he's done it, and what kind of examples and what he's used before. A little background on the Winneshiek Farmers Market. It's located in Decorah, Iowa, which is a community of about 8,500 people. The Farmers Market is located in the downtown of Decorah. It's in a parking lot right next to the Oneonta Food Co-op. It's the new location that they moved to probably 5 years ago. The space has room for 42 vendors, which in 2017 they reached their max for the first time ever of 42 vendors. So they were pretty excited, but then we're also very nervous about that. Like, what are we going to do if we get 43 vendors? And over the course of the year, we have over 65 vendors attend the market. It was established in 1976, so it's been around a few years. It's moved a few locations, and it started before I was born. And it does over $300,000 in sales annually, which is how I'm going to talk about how we get that number directly. This is the person that I'm wearing his hat today. Steve McCarter has been the Winneshiek Farmers Market Manager for the past, this will be his 8th year now. He is a man of many hats. He can't come today because he is a kindergarten or a preschool teacher and a janitor. So there's 2 other hats that he wears during the week and when he's not a farmers market manager. Steve is very focused on the metrics side and really sees the value in collecting this data, because he gets asked all the time about what the market is doing, how the market is achieving its goals, how the market is growing and changing over the past few years. This is just a sheet that he carries around every morning that he has every single person's vendor stall laid out to know exactly where they're going to be in the course of the day. So we have no gaps, and he knows who is there. And it's a small community, so he actually gets concerned about if someone actually doesn't show up and where are they, and hopefully that they're okay, and tries to check on them. So part of Steve's normal day-to-day operations, he will go out and he will lay out his parking lot, and every single vendor has a number, and they will park in their spot where their number is. And he likes to get out there early just to make sure. He tells me the first thing that he does every time he turns the corner to make sure there's nobody parked in that parking spot. Otherwise, he's got to call a tow truck right away in the morning. And he is out there at 4 a.m. on the Wednesdays and on Saturdays. I should have said that. So the Winnebago Farmers Market operates on Wednesdays 3 to 6, and then on Saturday from 8 to 11. How he gets some of his data. What Steve does on a normal day-to-day operation is, once people are checked in and kind of settled in, he will make up his first go-round. And this first go-round is to just check to make sure they have everything that they need, make sure that everything's going all right for the day, and just kind of get them off on the right foot. And then he'll sit down, and he actually has a sheet just like this one. I made it white. He actually makes it, it's really bright orange. He made it a bright color so people can see it and know it and kind of relate it back to this sales data. And he will do this on his second go-round. He says he tries to do it about hour and a half to 2 hours in there, depending on the amount of vendors. When it gets to 42 vendors, he's got to start almost right away. And as he's going around, he will write the date on every single one of these. So this is what each sheet will look like. It is no bigger than business card, maybe a little bit wider than a business card. He makes it on 8.5 by 11 so he can cut it up so he can get the most use of his paper. And he will date every single one before he hands it out to any vendors. And when you look at this, you can see that it has a very basic amount of information on it. He doesn't, and there's no name written on any of it, because that is one thing that the vendors have said they did not want to disclose, was their name and how much they did in sales that day, which that's just fine. If they want to collect it, we don't really need that. So Steve makes sure that the date is on every single one, and he looks for them to enter in how much in sales they did for the entire day. So that's everything that is included, from just regular sales to the other sales that I will be mentioning just now. In Decora, we have a few other programs that vendors can take an opportunity to partake in. One of them is a food bank dollar program, which annually does $15,000 to $25,000 in donation sales to the Winnebago Farmers Market. It's a collection of all the Winnebago County food pantries, which is all the churches in Winnebago County, go through and do private fundraising through businesses, indoor donations, and I think they received a few grants in the past. Winnebago Community Foundation has annually given to this food pantry. And these are given out every Wednesday, and they are given out in $1 and $5 increments, and they conveniently give it out 1 hour right before the farmers market on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, it's actually by far the busiest day for the farmers market food bank dollar coupons. And over the last 3 years, it's been a very big part of a lot of people's income, and we've seen it grow by 5,000 every year for the last 3 years. So Steve collects those and makes sure that the dollars that he's given equals the dollars that's equaled out. We found out last year that some people tried to duplicate and copy and counterfeit these food pantry coupons. So we had to up our ante on how we collected them and tracked them, and actually now we have fancy hard stock coupons. Who would have thought somebody would copy that? So the other one that Steve collects is the IDOLS dollars that are taken in, just to keep a total for himself and to make sure that people that are accepting those dollars actually know you can take those or can't take those. And those include WIC and the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program dollars. Another one that's unique for Winnebago County is our Winnebago Medical Center actually gets donations from the Habitat for Humanity to do their senior coupons. This is a senior program, and it's not quite as big as the food bank dollars, but actually has quite a bit of following as well. When they do the registration the day of the market, we get 20 to 30 seniors lined up, ready to take those dollars in. So he just keeps track of that as well. This is just all something he's encouraging vendors to keep track of. So when he goes around on the second time and he gives everyone this sheet of paper to fill out, he lets them fill it out at their leisure. He has a tin that sits up at the front, and it's just a big old popcorn tin with the top cut open. And when the vendors fill out their tally sheets at the end of the day, they stick them inside his tin. He tries to make a third go round, depending on time. As most market managers probably know, that you don't know what's going to happen day to day. But the tin always sits up at his table, which his table is always up towards the front of the market. And Steve says that the redemption rate is between 90 to 95% of the vendors turn in their tally sheets on a daily basis. So over the last 8 years, he's had a very good turnout for people returning their slips. And I think it's because the simplicity of the form, there's not a lot of difficult questions on there. Hopefully they're tracking those things themselves. To get redeemed for a lot of those other programs, they need to be keeping track of that. And the fact that there's no name on it, we've heard from the vendors at the Winneshiek Farmers Market that they wouldn't be turning in these sheets if it had their name on it. So by not having their name on it and just showing the Winneshiek Farmers Market brings in this much has been tremendous for the Winneshiek Farmers Market because they rent this space from the city for $1 a year. So annually we meet with the city manager, and it always comes up about how the farmers market is doing. And this is something for the city officials to really understand. They really connect with the numbers aspect. They don't quite understand if you're like, oh, we have 42 vendors, that's great. And he's like, well, what do they really do? What are they doing? I don't really know. But when you tell them the number of over $300,000 in sales, it really clicks in their head of you being a downtown business. They really are very grateful that the Winneshiek Farmers Market is there in the downtown and helping promote that. So that was my brief overview of what Steve does on his day-to-day operations for collecting sales data at the Winneshiek Farmers Market. And I would be happy to take any questions. I do my best to answer Steve's questions.
What was the IDALS stand for again?
That's the Iowa Departments of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. They are the administrators for the Farmers Market Nutrition Program dollars.
SNAP and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and then SNAP, all those, the government program dollars, because SNAP is through Iowa Department of Public Health. And then, but there's another webinar on that Farmers Market Nutrition Program, because we all know how complicated that stuff can be. So, yes.
I've seen Steve present and talk about how he's done this before, and I guess my question might be as much to vendors here as, it's a busy day, you've got customers up until the end. Do vendors stop and count their money before they leave, or do they take it home and then count? And so my question about, how do they get that done? Or do they work around that? Because I would guess by the time market's over, it's time to pack up and leave. Vendors aren't counting money there on the spot. But maybe I'm wrong.
I can answer from my perspective. There's always walls at the market, so we're very good about writing as we're selling, and then if we get a wall, we'll put a line, add that portion up. Okay, that was $318, and then we'll start again, and then we just boom, 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 boom. We know.
And just for those online too, I'll just kind of repeat it. So the question was, when do vendors find the time to keep track of their sales data? And if they do it at the end or if they take it home. And then Charlie responded back that he can find some lulls in the market and then try to keep track of it that way.
We don't seem to have many holes.
Yep.
So for us, it's much easier to take it home and do it, and then turn that slip in the next time. We would be perfectly fine with. I'm not comfortable with standing there counting the money afterwards when it's starting to get dark sometimes, or when everybody else is leaving. We're one of the last ones to leave anyway because of the size of our booths. So I personally would rather count it at home, fill out the slip, bring it back first thing.
Yep.
That's just because of the size that we're at right now.
Yep. I will say for the Winneshiek Farmers Market, there are both. There are those that are like Charlie, they can find the time in the middle of the market and they will mark it down, they'll turn it in as soon as they're leaving. And then there are, there's plenty that go home and then count it and then bring it back. It's just up to the vendor, and Steve just always he preaches the importance of those numbers as the farmers market as a whole. So as Darlene talked, so when you can report back to other people that don't understand for the farmers market, this is one of the easiest ways. And if you don't turn in your money, then our number is lower and the market doesn't look as good. Customer counts or surveys. So we started doing customer counts last year because we got into a very long debate about extending the market to another hour on Saturdays because we have quite a few customers that squeak in right at the last minute and always thought that the market went till noon, even though for the last 32 years the farmers market has never gone till noon. So, as marketing usually goes. So this year we extended it by half an hour was the compromise between those that did and those that did not want to extend, and some counted. But again, learning from Darlene today on how to do a customer count, I think people were not doing customer counts in a methodical fashion. They were just kind of sporadically, when they had a lull, they went out and did a count. But then the count was lower because they had a lull. We didn't really have one directed person to do the customer counts, which is what I would suggest, and having volunteers signed up, and nobody had a clicker, so people were counting in their heads, and there was no clear methodology, which I think would be something that has already been voiced for concern and interest for 2018, but we will see how that gets implemented. Up next is it Becky?
Okay, I am Becky Huang with North Iowa Berries and More here in Mason City, Iowa. And as you can see, we run a 3-acre farm, which our family does. We have 8 children. I have been kind of made the head of the farm since my husband teaches. He substitute teaches, and then he also has a full-time job outside of the home. And so he helps when he can, but otherwise it's up to the kids and I to do it. We use organic practices. We do chemical-free as much as possible. Our farm is very choppy, so we cannot use tractors. We cannot use big equipment, so everything is done by hand. And so as a result, we spend a lot of hours doing a lot of extra things that other people can do much quicker with equipment. We take berries, vegetables to 2 farmers markets at the moment in North Iowa. We also sell off the farm. We also do baked goods. And so for record keeping, we have 2 separate entities. We put it all under North Iowa Berries, but I keep records for the baked goods and the cost of goods for making that. I also keep records for the farm. When we started out 6 years ago, I did not keep records. I did not know that there was such a need for it. And so we were, like most of the other vendors in our area, we were taking literally baskets of tomatoes and baskets of cucumbers and pints of berries to market, not realizing that we needed to have records for that. Problem was, the next year came along and we could not for the world remember which kinds of plants we grew. We had customers saying, "We want low-acid tomatoes. What was that kind you had last year?" I could not remember for the world which it was. So we got real smart real quick. Jan Libby came alongside of me. She helped me get going with record keeping. I will admit, after 6 years, I'm still flabbergasted by the number of vendors that do not keep records. They keep very basic records. They might keep their receipts of their expenses, maybe. They do not keep track of what they harvest. I've been a vendor rep on with 2 different markets. I've been on 2 different farmers market boards in the past. And that is probably the thing that surprises me the most, is how many vendors do not keep records. And so I do feel like this is an area that vendors need to be educated on. They need to understand the importance of the record keeping. Why keep farm records? For one thing, we discovered very quickly it determines our farm's profitability. We are able to actually measure our production. We're able to figure out, is it worth keeping this or is it not worth keeping it? We kept records very easily to begin with, and we still do for some things. When we're actually planting in the high tunnel, when we're planting in our garden area, we actually just write on the packets of the seeds the day we planted them. And then I bring those seed packets back in the house once a week. I then come together to the office and I just type them all out for each area of the garden, and I put it in my file cabinet. And that's the way I keep track of how much I plant of each kind of vegetable and fruit. That has worked okay for us because we're a very small farm. If we got any larger, you can bet I'm going to have to go to a software program. I will tell you in a little bit, we did try a software program that we liked, but it was just very time consuming for me because I was doing so many other things with the family and in the community at that time. But I will get to that in a little bit. We also discovered that the records show which crops were winners, which ones were losers. For example, we started out with lots of strawberries in a half acre, and they were ever-bearing strawberries. Our customers loved them. We were getting rave reviews on Facebook about it. People were calling us night and day saying, can we have more of your strawberries, more of your strawberries? And so we thought, this is the way to go. This is definitely the way to go. We're going to enlarge. We're going to go to 1 acre and then 2 acres, 3 acres. The first season, we realized that we thought we did really well. We got $8,000 for the season out of that half acre. The problem was that we couldn't bring tractors or anything in, so we were laying the plastic. Everything we were laying by hand. We were planting it. We were doing excessive weeding. We had a farmer who thought he was helping us, and he donated straw for us to cover our berries with, to find out it was grass seed. And we are still fighting that grass to this day. So we were doing hours, up to 12 hours a day out in the strawberries, weeding. It was just unreal. When we started counting all that up, when we started going back to our paper records, we realized we had spent $8,500 that year in just labor, packaging, harvesting. That didn't count the time at market. That didn't count our daughters who found snakes constantly out there, which meant they weren't out there helping then. We finally realized we had to let the strawberries go. That was one thing. That didn't count all the chiropractor visits. We had a lot of those because of all the working on the ground with that. So we then looked at our other records. We found out raspberries, we had 1/8 of an acre, so just not that much. We were getting $3,000 in sales with those raspberries. Our expenses for that year was $800 with labor, packaging, mulch. We were picking every day. It still was nothing compared to what the strawberries had been. As a result, we decided, you know what, that's one thing we're going to keep. We're going to keep the raspberries. We did the same thing with the blueberries, aronia berries, all the different kinds of berries we had. And we discovered there were some, once we looked back at the records, they weren't worth keeping, even if people wanted them. It just wasn't worth it. So that was one thing we discovered. Keeping records really helped us to find out what was important, what wasn't important. We also were able to use our records then to figure out which markets were the best markets to go to. That was something that emotionally, we became very attached to some of the markets. We had a market 30 miles away we went to once a week. We loved the customers there. They loved us. We enjoyed working together as a team with the other vendors. It just seemed like it was such a good thing. And yet we had vendors there that were undercutting us big time. They were selling their loaves of bread for $1. We couldn't sell them for $1. We just couldn't. And once we went to the records, we realized we were losing $60 a week at that market. You count that times 22 markets, that was hurting us tremendously. Same thing, we had another market. We loved the board members. We loved to attend it. However, there was a high saturation of product. The market was letting in 20 sweet corn vendors. They were letting in 30 tomato vendors. They weren't limiting it any. As a result, we were all coming with all this produce. We couldn't sell it all. We were going home with a lot of produce that we just had to get rid of in other ways that hurt us tremendously then. And as a result of that, we were losing $40 a week. Well, you take that times 21 weeks, that was hurting us. We had two other markets. One was just 15 miles away. Vendors there were equal in their prices. It was a strong tourist market. We figured out very quickly, with keeping records, we were making $350 a week profit. That one we could keep then as a result. And then the fourth market was our closest one. That was twice a week. And there we could bring in up to $700 a week during the peak seasons. Vendors were equal in their prices, the low saturation rate, where we knew we could really sell out on our product or at least sell most of it. Our goal was never to have more than 5% of our product left. How do you know that unless you're keeping track of records? So that helped us tremendously. And there was a need for chemical-free produce there. Lots of people from the hospital that were looking for chemical-free. So that became a very good market for us as well. And so we would have never, ever known that if it wasn't for that. This is kind of just an example of the sheet. We take papers to market with us. We have 5 pages stapled together of all our products. I print them out ahead of time. I just have a stack of them there so the kids who go to market can take it with them. As we're harvesting, we keep track of how many peppers are coming in the house, how many tomatoes are coming in the house, how many pints of blueberries, how many pints of raspberries, and then they just mark it on this sheet on the side, on the left-hand side. That's what goes to market. Then at the end of the day, when they bring everything back from market, we see what's left. And if we have, let's say we are taking 25 bunches of rhubarb, we come back with 1 bunch, we know 24 bunches evidently sold. So then we write 24 on there. That helps us because then from there, I take it to my QuickBooks software, I put it into an invoice, like this one, North Iowa Farmers Market. I start just putting in everything it sold. I take it off that sheet. It takes me 15 minutes. It's not that bad of a thing. And then it gives me a total price of how much I sold for the day. I then go to my money box, see if the money equals out. Almost always it does. It's not a problem. And so then I know how much exactly I made. I know exactly how many bunches of everything I sold. So, which comes in really handy at the end of the year when you're trying to figure out, do I want to sell tomatoes again? Do I want to sell beets again? It will tell me if I really, really want to or not. So that has been extremely helpful and easy for us to do. It's also helped us with preparing accurate income tax returns. If you have to get a loan, if you have a paper trail, it helps you tremendously. You don't keep that paper trail, it's going to be a lot harder. Even if you get audited, when selling the farm, all of that, you need a paper trail. I'm amazed at how many small vendors say, we'll never get audited. We don't have to worry about that. We're too small. For beginners, I have a relative that is an IRS auditor. They don't go after the small guys a lot, but they do go after them. We are considered to be a small farm. We got audited this year because they noticed we were giving away a lot of produce to the food bank and to Community Kitchen, and they were questioning that. So a couple weeks ago, we got a thing from the Iowa Department of Revenue. They wanted proof. They wanted to see all of our papers, receipts, to prove that we had given that away. It wasn't anything we panicked over because we had it all filed. It was ready to go. All we did is pulled out the papers, made copies of it, sent it back into them. When the guy received it there at the department, he called and said, you're good to go. No problem, you proved it. So if you've got the paper trail, it's not a scary thing. If you don't have the paper trail, you better be scared. And I've been trying to explain that to a lot of the vendors in our area. Use a file cabinet, labeled box, just anything to hold your receipts, your bank statements, invoices, details of payment, credit card purchases, sales receipts. All of that has come in handy, especially with us this year when we had to prove things to the department. And so I'm extremely, extremely thankful that we did that. We also try to tell the vendors they don't have to be afraid. So many of them are afraid of using software. I don't have time to do a lot of software. I'll be honest with you, I just don't. I don't have time to put in every little detail into the computer, but I am discovering some things you really do need to put in, and you can put in. We were introduced to Excel, I think it was 5 years ago. Lots of farmers use that. They love Excel. For me, it was too much. It was too many numbers, too many charts. I couldn't seem to wrap my head around it the right way. So I quit using Excel. However, I've talked to other vendors that love it, and they really do get along well with it. We used Ag Squared, which is an online record-keeping platform to help map out your farm in your schedules. It keeps track of your plantings. It gives you a Google map. It will figure out exactly how much you can plant in each area. And I loved that, but that too was getting too detailed for the size of the farm we were. Now, if we got to be a larger farm, I'd probably go back to it. But I really couldn't do that. So we ended up with QuickBooks, which was the easiest. We had owned the bookstore before. We were used to QuickBooks, so it was easy to transition over for the farm. It kept track of our sales very easily, our customer invoices. I have a screenshot of it up there. It kept our daily sales. It allowed us to accept credit cards if we wanted it to. We didn't use that part of it, and we still don't. But we could do our checking on there. We could do our employees with payroll and everything with it. It just became a very easy way to find records very, very quickly. Costs about $300 to $350 for the software. We only change it about every 3 years, so it's about $100 a year. For me, it's worth it. I find it very well worth it. And so that's the method of software that we use on a regular basis. It doesn't take that long. I made an example chart here to show you for sales. It easily came up, so anytime I want to, I can see how much I'm making in June, July, August, September, whatever month. It tells me exactly what items I've sold. So I can look at it and I can say, oh, banana bread sold great. I'm going to keep that up in these certain months, but not in this month necessarily. And so I go to these charts all the time to see where I'm at, what I need to be selling, what I shouldn't be selling. It also helps me because then when I do have board members and market managers saying, what's your biggest seller? I can easily pull it up off QuickBooks and find out. You can do the same thing though with Excel and others. We've also discovered that good record keeping helps the market manager keep the market strong. Market managers truly do need to have the figures. They do need to know what's selling, what's not. I strongly believe managers need to know what the saturation levels are for market. I believe they need to understand you can't have truckloads of one product and nothing of the other products. You've got to have a good balance. You've got to make sure that vendors can really sell their products and get them moved out the door. Good records assist the managers in knowing what they need to do to better advertise the market. When we were selling, well, in fact, we still are, when we're selling low-acid tomatoes, it's nice to know that advertising is being taken toward the senior citizens because the senior citizens are the ones that love those specialized vegetables more. And so I believe it helps with that. It helps them to know how much they should be charging for the booth rentals. We've got some vendors at one market, they sell very little. And so they're only making possibly $400 or $500 a season. Then if you're charging them $135 for a booth rental, that hurts them. Now, is there things they could do to improve themselves? Yeah, there probably is. But I'm just saying it's good for market managers to really know that. If there's vendors that are big and they're bringing in $30,000, $40,000, whatever a year, they can handle a little bit more for booth rentals. That's not a problem. But it's just nice to be able to know that. One thing managers, I think, need to understand, most vendors are not, at least the ones in this area who I daily or weekly talk to, they are not understanding the importance of keeping records. So if you wait till the end of the season and you say, by the way, I want to know how many sales you made for the year, how many tomatoes you sold, how much corn you sold, this kind of thing, they're not going to be very happy about giving you anything. It's true, they're not going to want to put their name on it for sure. They like to keep things confidential, but they are more likely to give it to you if you told them right off at the beginning of the year, this is what we're going to ask you to do this year. We want to know what are the main products you sold, how much you sold, money-wise of those things, how much you regularly sell. I would think that'd be very helpful. For example, we have a vendor who in the past in one of our markets who brought pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds of a certain vegetable. He's thinking of not coming back this year. If he doesn't come back, we're going to be without a lot of tomatoes and peppers. And it would be extremely, extremely helpful for the other vendors to know that up front, that, oh, this many pounds need to be brought into market. They could maybe then be planting extra, or else you could be finding another vendor. I mean, yeah, several other vendors, in fact, to fill that void. So I would think it'd be helpful for managers to kind of know how much the vendors are selling. Then, at the end of the season, give them another survey. I like the idea of every week, knowing every week how much money is being brought in. I think that would be extremely helpful to the market. But for sure, at the end of the season, get that survey out and keep it confidential. Vendors are pretty picky about that. But go ahead and do it so you know how to advertise for the next season. That's just so extremely important. I think that's it. That is. Do you have any questions? Nope.
Great job.
You're amazing.
Okay, Charlie Puffer's going to round us out here. Charlie Farms down in Iowa Falls. List of things I mentioned before. And he's going to talk to us about how he collects metrics for his farm.
Okay, good afternoon. Charlie Puffer, Puffer-Roski Farms. We're actually a relatively young farm. We started operations in 2016 after I retired out of the military for 25 years of service with the United States Air Force. I don't have any fancy slides. I'm just going to talk about my experience on the farm, what we do as far as capturing metrics and financials for the farm, and it somewhat translates over to the farmers markets and producers and vendor relations. So a little bit about our farm. We're a very diverse farm. We started out in 2016 with 3 acres. That first year we did about we did just shy of $9,500. Woohoo! It was great. And as Becky attested to, it's very important to track your financials, because after all that hard work on 3 acres, we cleared a whopping $1,800 in profits. Okay? Because everything we did on the farm, we actually have a 5-year farm plan. Everything we did on the farm, we dumped right back in. So our inputs weren't really that big on 3 acres. We turned around and we bought a $1,600 tiller and a $1,500 tractor, okay, to get more efficient, because we're always looking for those time management things to get more efficient. Second year on the farm, and we did 2 farmers markets that year. We did Hampton and we did Iowa Falls. All of our income literally came from those 2 markets. The following year we expanded to 5 acres. Last year we did a total of $34,463 as far as bringing in. Now, of that $34,463, $12,000 of that was at markets. We were doing markets 6 days a week, so we didn't really see that much of an increase. What we did do is we opened up the farm. Because of our location, we opened up our farm, and so the breakdown was 25% of our income came from the farmers markets. The other 75% came directly from sales off the farm. This year, with our projected, we're expanding to, before I get ahead of myself, overall profit for the farm last year was $4,300, okay? But again, we did a lot of investment. It's reinvesting in the farm. The first 5 years of our farm, we will show little to no profit. It's not by design, but it's kind of by necessity. We started out with very minimal equipment. First thing we did was put in the equipment. This last year, almost all our profits went to build a store on the farm, because that is where we're seeing our market. Farmers market, and if he's online, I'd be shocked. Sorry, I don't pull any punches. I'll tell it like it is absolutely the worst farmers market. The funny thing is, and it's a shame, because when I was a kid growing up, it was one of the best farmers market in the area. Our market is non-existent. I sat there many times last year for $14, and that's year before I didn't do it a second year, because we got to make financial decisions, and that was one of them. For the market managers, if you're going to be successful, you got to get producer input and don't lie to your vendors. It will absolutely kill your market. So we made the conscious decision to go ahead and sell straight off farm. Now, we're very blessed with our location. Our location is pavement on pavement. We are 4 miles northeast of Iowa Falls. We're at the crossroads of 65, Highway 57, which used to be Old 20, and County Road S45. Well, what's nice about that location? I get all the people coming from a small town of Ackley, about 7 miles. I get the folks coming from Hampton, Sheffield, and even Mason City. And then I get the Iowa Falls crowd, Alden and Eldora. That particular market manager told me, well, there's no money to be made. Well, we did 22,000 on farm. So there is money to be made. It's just a poorly run market. This year again, what we didn't put into the farm store, we upgraded equipment. We got a water wheel planter, we got a Hiller mulcher drip tape layer, and we are expanding to 15 acres. We will add 200 blueberries this year because, again, I have literally very little competition around me. So I've got the market cornered so far, though I would love to see more grower producers doing what I'm doing, but based off of future projection. And we're opening up the farm to you pick, we pick, because it's just my wife, me, my wife's son, and I. So for right now, our goal is to take some of that labor cost out. If I can get people to, I can get people to come to the farm, that's not the issue. But if I can get them to pick, I can charge them what they'd pay at the store, except for it didn't come from 1,500 miles or 3,000 miles away, and it's nutrient dense and it's fresh and it's not bitter. But there are a certain segment, which are the people I love, that will not pick their own vegetables. So then we figure in the labor charge. I think Becky hit it on the point of going to a market, and there's nothing more frustrating than seeing somebody selling cucumbers for 10 and 15 cents. Okay, obviously a new producer, but that's one of the things that the market managers, if you see that, you need to get him gone or her gone. And I saw it at a market last year that somebody came in with zucchini, cucumbers, and something else, and they were charging 10 cents for a small zucchini, I think 25 cents for a cucumber. When my wife told me about it, she was, I'm just glad I wasn't there, because I would have gone up and I would have talked to that vendor. Because there's no way, yeah, he sold out of everything at that particular market, but he didn't make any money, because I happen to know where that person had come from. So there's no way he could have possibly made money. He was just trying to dump his produce. So market managers, one of the things, you got to keep an eye on those vendors that are undercutting. If you see them undercutting, hopefully in your bylaws or your markets, you have written in that where you have the undercutting going on, where you see somebody, where you see everybody else is $2 and $3 for a certain item, and then you see this guy over here for 50 cents a dollar. You got to tell them, hey, you need to go. When I'm calculating my time and my metrics for my markets, it includes a drive time. So if it's an hour for me to drive to a market, and then I sit there on a Saturday for 4 hours, 30 minutes setup, 30 minutes tear down, okay, and then an hour back, I've got 6 hours invested, okay? That's not including the time I spent packing and washing ahead of time, which by that time you're at 8 hours. You're at about 8 hours, depending on how much you're bringing to market. So with that time calculation, what do you have to do to break even? Well, if I go to a big market and I have 8 hours, if I don't hit $600-700, that time away from the farm is not worth it, because again, that's 6 hours. That's 6 hours I can't be doing something on the farm. So there's a perspective there. Let's talk about this year. So this year we're going up to 15 acres with projected income, talking to additional growers that are doing similar scale size. Our actual expectation gross, and this is with a 30% waste stream, meaning I'm feeding 30% of my excess produce that is either bug bitten, nobody will buy because it's not the pretty gorgeous one, piece of fruit or vegetable. We are talking $115,000 gross. Now my inputs this year will be much higher. I'll have about $30,000 worth of expenses. Sounds like a great, hey Charlie, you finally made it. And again, I think with what we're doing, expectations is with the farmers markets and the farm store, we believe that we will stay at probably that 25% is what we're expecting. But it sounds great. So you're at $115,000. Life is grand. You're rolling in the money, right? But then when you sit there and you break down, okay, I'm going to have $30,000 worth of inputs this year between seed, fuel, irrigation, drip line, main line, expenses of propane, buying seed trays, that kind of stuff. That's going to be my input for the farm this year. When you get to that point, so you're like, yay, okay, so we're now at $85,000. Well, now we got to pay us a little bit this year and have $30,000 set aside for what's projected to happen the following year. So we're operating the farm where we're not going out into debt, but we're actually operating the farm with current money versus future money. And that's if Mother Nature doesn't throw us a curveball, which you never know. But then we're going to turn around, and again, first 5 years, we got to invest in the farm. So we had to upgrade a Ranger, so you're talking another $13,000, almost $14,000 expense, just for the simple fact that we have to be able to because we're getting so big, we have to be able to get people to and from the field. And if you got somebody elderly, well, they're not going to want to walk a quarter of a mile to go get to their stuff. So there's some logistical challenges there. Then the following side of that is we're actually going to put in if we have the year that we think we're going to have, we will go ahead and we will put in what they call a 12-month greenhouse, where we'll actually be able to do something that is actually currently being done in Nebraska and some places in Canada, but as far as I know, is not being done in Iowa, and that is actually grow citrus here in Iowa. So again, expanding where most people wouldn't expand. This year we will add 32 apple trees that I just happened to buy today because they're a real good deal, and then we're also doing peaches and cherries this year. But again, those are 4-year projects before we see any income, and the market managers need to realize there's some produce. People always go, gosh, why are your blueberries $6 or $7 or $8? I got 3 years before realistically I'm getting berries off of them. And there's a lot of labor involved in picking blueberries, as Becky can attest to, and raspberries and that kind of stuff. So metrics are very, very, very important, especially, I will always have a 5-year farm plan, and capturing those metrics of, is this vegetable worth it? If you're growing beets and nobody's buying beets, it's got to go. You got to find something that makes money. A lot of these folks, and I'll be honest, the very first year with the anonymous cards, if you'd asked me to put my name on that card, there's no way I'd do it. Why? Because we never think we're making enough money, and the newer growers, they see everybody else raking in money hand over fist, supposedly. That's kind of a myth, but because everything's to scale. The larger the operation, the larger the input, the more throughput you got to do to break even. So why it looks like some of these big vendors are making money, you know, it's the first couple months of the the first month and a half of the market is covering your costs. Only till after the end do you see the profit. You know, and making sure that we're limited quantities, again, like Becky said, at the markets. There's nothing more frustrating than seeing 500 people or 40 vendors come to a market and all 40 of them have all the exact same thing, and then everybody goes home with a lot. So it's kind of one of those things. So as far as metrics on the farm, keeping those data points, how much time you have, how can you get more efficient is the biggest thing. How can you get more efficient without sacrificing the quality or the objective of your farm? At the point we're a chemical-free farm, I will say with the exception of my sweet corn, for the simple fact that it was corn last year, but how we're laying out our farm this year, it was previously field corn the year before, so I am going to have to use fertilizer because if I don't produce the manure on the farm, I won't put it on my fields. Because if I'm a chemical-free farm, and if I am, we use no herbicides, no pesticides, but I sit there and I bring in manure and it's loaded down with antibiotics from the K-Force, it does absolutely no good. And I also actually bring in the potential, bring in a superbug to my farm, you know, a MRSA type situation, because you just never know with some of the issues that I know that they have in the K-Force. I'm an Excel spreadsheet guy. I like tracking all my expenses through Excel spreadsheet, the discipline of keeping the receipts, and then I'm literally seeing how much money's going out every Saturday night before I go to bed. I sit down, I have a basket. It's actually one of those longer burger baskets. Every receipt I get for the week just gets thrown in there. And then at the end of the week, I pull it out, punch it into Excel, and I know how much money I'm down until I'm going to be back up. So we kind of have it set up that we got, okay, this is what we got coming in, this is what we had going out. It's early in the season. We know we have more going out than we're coming in, but then we get to know, we can track weekly on, are we losing money? You know, at the point compared to last year when we were already making money. So we've got that. But a farm plan is absolutely critical because A, it sets your goals. B, it gets you thinking about the future. And for those producers out there, they're garbage in, garbage out. The data you collect, if it's not utilized or it's not collected correctly, you'll have no clue what's going on. Because I famously watched these YouTube videos of $250,000 on a quarter acre. Yeah. Great if you're in Los Angeles, great if you're in Dallas. Yep, that's going to work. But when you're in a more rural setting, you either literally have to go to where the customers are, or you have to make it a reason for the customers to come to you. It's covered everything. Again, I cannot stress the criticality for the market managers. I will say, out of the 6 markets we did last year, we only had one. Out of the 8 markets we've done total in the last 2 years, we've only had one market manager, and that was bad. That was terrible. Besides that, you can tell the people that are passionate, and I do appreciate the market managers because they do put up with a lot of crap. I mean, but you guys make it happen, so thank you. I appreciate the time. If anybody has any questions about what we're doing, like I said, I'm more than willing to share how we capture data on the farm. And if that's it, any questions?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Darlene. Thanks all for here today in person. Thanks to the Landfill North Iowa for helping us, Healthy Harvest in North Iowa for helping us get connected with these folks in this space. Everybody.